Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down how Southampton shocked Chelsea to claim 3 points at Stamford Bridge and set the Blues back in the top 4 race. But before we do that, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel on our road to 2K subscribers. But now, when we do look at the board and we do assess the game, we have Chelsea in a 3-4-2-1, a similar system that they played against Spurs, whereas Southampton dropped off into 2 banks of 4. And this game was all about Southampton's shape and the issues Chelsea have breaking down teams that prefer to sit in deeper blocks. We know why Chelsea possibly thought that they could play the system, given the fact that they were able to beat Spurs. But when we really assess that game, the things that Chelsea did right there was obviously the fact that Marcos Alonso did play. So he was able to break in behind and offer more of a goal-scoring threat than per se Emerson, who does like to drive forward and deliver crosses. But what we also have to look at is the fact that when you really assess that game, Chelsea didn't create an ample amount of chances. They were able to exploit Serge Aurier and how poor he's been at right back this season. Gazzaniga made a huge mistake. And when you look at their first goal, it stemmed from a short corner kick that did see Serge Aurier take too much time to step out to Willian for him to convert a superb effort past Gazzaniga. Mourinho changed the system in the second half, and when you really do assess it, this would have been the barometer as to see whether that 3-man backline would be successful going long term, because when you do look at that, like I said, not enough chances created. That's been Chelsea's downfall over the past few weeks. And here they kind of encountered the same issues. Because when you do look at it, like I said, 2 banks of 4 without the ball. Yes, Chelsea do have a 3v2 at the back, and perhaps that did make sense given the fact that they knew that Southampton would go with 2 strikers just to have the spare man there so that the center backs weren't involved in 1v1 battles. Southampton pressed from the front. They looked to close down Chelsea when they did try to build out of the back. And when we do assess that, you end up having Adams and Obafemi stepping towards the center backs. What ended up happening initially was that Zuma wasn't pressed, and you'd have Adams and Obafemi pressing the wider center backs in Tomori and Rudiger. But as the game wore on, we would see Adams step into Zuma and then have Obafemi pushing out to Tomori, and that would ignite Redmond to stick out to Rudiger. In midfield, the battle was set. James Ward-Prowse stepped to Jorginho, Højbjerg against Kante, and we had Armstrong constantly pushing forward to ensure that when Emerson ever received the ball on his first touch, Armstrong was there. That left Azpilicueta free down the right-hand side when Redmond did look to shoot out to Rudiger, and we'll get to that in a minute. But what was also key here was what Chelsea's wider players were doing. So you have Hudson-Odoi and Willian, who often swap flanks and never looked like they had a designated side to play. If one moved to the left, the other moved to the right, and vice versa. But what they were trying to do is that they were taking up narrow positions, drifting laterally, trying to receive the ball between the lines. You had the wider players pushing out, trying to receive the ball ahead of Bertrand and Cedric. That never really worked out well in Hudson-Odoi's favor, as he often got pushed off the ball and never was able to link play or hold off the fullbacks. And they try to receive the ball in space in between Bednarek and Bertrand, or Stevens and Cedric. However, the fullbacks in Cedric and Bertrand did a very good job of ensuring that those 2 players never received the ball freely between the lines. And frankly, with them playing so narrow and drifting laterally, the aim here was to play those quick, intricate passes in those narrow central positions to bypass Southampton's backline, but that never really worked out. And when you look at Tammy Abraham, just starved of service. Jorginho wasn't able to get balls over the top, and we'll get to that in a minute. And those front 2 and behind him just were unable to connect with the center forward. The center backs didn't play long balls over the top enough, and Bednarek and Stevens weren't tested airily against Abraham. And whenever balls were played in behind or into the channels for Abraham, Stevens and Bednarek did a very good job of sweeping up and ensuring that Abraham couldn't receive the ball. So that was pivotal in terms of how Chelsea were looking to try and create chances, going through the middle, quick intricate passes, not able to combine. And then when you look at the midfield, when you have those front 3s closing down the center backs, and you have Højbjerg and you have James Ward-Prowse stepping in, they kind of form a 5-man box around the two. So when you really do assess it, if the front three aren't connecting and the midfield and the center backs can't get service out to them, then that's the biggest problem that Chelsea had here. There was no link play. Willian or Hudson-Odoi never tried to drop into midfield to possibly get on the ball, and Chelsea struggled to create chances here. No shots on target from open play in that first half, and that just is an indictment on how good Southampton were without the ball. Like I said, front three close down the back three. They block off the passing lanes into the center midfielders. The only time Jorginho and Conte got onto the ball was when they dropped off into those deeper gaps. And then Emerson is closed out of the game. So that means that there's one spare man on the field, and it was Azpilicueta. Whenever Jorginho was able to get the ball in those deeper positions away from that press, he was only able to clip the ball out in towards Azpilicueta. He never connected well with Abraham. He couldn't combine those passes. And when he was able to switch that ball out to Azpilicueta, one of the keys there was that because Redmond was so high, that allowed Azpilicueta to push forward. And what happened here is that regardless if it was Hudson-Odoi or Willian in that position, they would often occupy the fullback, so that would force Bertrand to shift over and then have Bednarek step out to Hudson-Odoi or Willian. But the problem here is that whenever Azpilicueta received the ball in those wider areas, number one, he never combined well with Abraham, and number two, his crosses were often over or under hit, and they never met any of his teammates. So the main outlet that Southampton looked to get Chelsea to constantly play out to was Azpilicueta. They gambled and were okay with him getting the ball in those wider areas, and frankly, it paid off because whenever he got into those zones, just unable to connect with teammates. But Chelsea's main attacking threats were stifled here due to the fact that Southampton's pressing was energetic and their shape without the ball was organized. Chelsea couldn't play through the lines, they couldn't get service into Abraham, and frankly, the midfield and the back three, who could potentially start attacks from deep, were stifled out of the game. However, Southampton did take the lead in the first half, and the manner in which they did that became a reoccurring issue for Chelsea when they try to play out of the back. Here we have Zouma on the ball and he shifts it out to Tomori. No press from the Southampton center forwards, and we see Tomori slide the ball out to Emerson, and once Emerson gets the ball, Armstrong steps towards him. When Armstrong steps, Emerson's able to bypass Armstrong to play a pass into Hudson-Odoi, who is closed by Cedric, and his first touch is poor, which allows Armstrong to step in. Emerson's trying to hit them on the overlap, but once Hudson-Odoi is closed down by Armstrong as well, Hudson-Odoi loses the ball. Højbjerg picks it up, and with Jorginho coming across, Højbjerg is able to play a pass around Jorginho and across Tomori. Tomori should do better here. That ball should never pass him, but it slightly does. And it falls to Obafemi, who's able to run at Zouma. And you have Adams making that run across Rudiger and Zouma in that big gap. And what that allows is that it allows Obafemi to cut in on Zouma and curl a superb effort into the top corner past Kepa. But that is quick transitional play from Southampton, pressing well, closing down Chelsea's key attacking players, and then breaking swiftly on the counter-attack. After that, Southampton dropped off a bit deeper without the ball, with Obafemi and Adams sitting in between Jorginho. When you break down that first half as a whole, not many chances created here, and that's credit to Southampton's shape. Chelsea couldn't get a kick in. They never really tested McCarthy, and when you look at it, no service for Abraham. The narrow attacking midfielders just didn't really work because they were unable to get passes in those tight spaces. And based off of Southampton's organization and pressing, yes, they did give Azpilicueta a lot of space, and that was a bit of a gamble. But when you look across the pitch, they shut down the midfield. They shut down Emerson from breaking forward, who is more of an attacking threat than Azpilicueta at wing back, and the center back struggled to create out of the back. So when we look to the second half, Chelsea did make a change, bringing on Mason Mount for Zouma and moving to a 4-2-3-1. However, Chelsea's issues didn't really improve here. They did get one good quality chance in that half when we saw Azpilicueta throw the ball over James Ward-Prowse into the path of Mount, and Mount was able to spin away from James Ward-Prowse and poke the ball between Bednarek and Højbjerg for Abraham, who was posting up Stevens in right half space, and he was able to turn on the outside but fire a shot into the side netting. Besides that, the introduction of Mount was supposed to give Chelsea another attacking player in that zone, perhaps find a way to dominate that midfield and create chances for Abraham, but that didn't happen. Frankly, Mount didn't really receive the ball in between the lines. That's not the type of player that he is, and he struggled to really get the ball in those attacking positions. And when you really do assess it, if they did have any issues with Mount, they could push a center back onto him, but like I said, he wasn't drifting out into those zones, and frankly, he never really influenced the game in the manner that Lampard possibly would have wanted him to, with that being him pushing towards the box, creating chances for the wider players or Abraham, or when you do really assess it, helping Chelsea dictate that center of the pitch. That wasn't done, and when you do look at the system that they were playing now, yes, they're more comfortable with it, but it made it easier for Southampton, because now it's just a straight, practically 4-4-2 against a 4-4-2 if you have Mount trying to push a bit higher. And if that's not even the case, you can have, like I said, Stevens or Bednarik stepping forward to close down Mount to match up across the pitch. However, with Chelsea being forced to push forward, there was always an opportunity that Southampton would be able to break on the counterattack, and they did that convincingly throughout that second half. And frankly, it always stemmed through Chelsea trying to play through their midfield and Southampton quickly winning the ball and pouncing. When we look to the first example, it's Rudiger pushing forward and being pressed by Obafemi, and he tries to play the ball through midfield to find Abraham, and when Steven steps into it, he guides the ball into the path of Azpilicueta, who should be getting onto it, with Obafemi also trying to get onto the ball, and they both miss it, Obafemi intentionally, and it ends up falling into the path of Redmond, who does break down the left, and it forces Rudiger out because Azpilicueta is out of position. He's able to skip past Rudiger, and with Jorginho jogging across, we have Redmond breaking towards goal, you have Tomori coming across, and you have Adams breaking at the back post. And when Redmond delivers a cross into the 6-yard box, Tomori does enough to slide and redirect it away from Adams to prevent Southampton from doubling their lead. But like I said, trying to play through that narrow midfield, Steven steps well, and because Azpilicueta doesn't anticipate the ball with Obafemi looking to get into it, it does create space for Redmond to break down that flank, and they have the pace and the direct threat to harm Chelsea, and they nearly did there. Shortly after that, once again, it's Rudiger stepping forward, and he ends up sliding the ball out to Hudson-Odoi on the touchline, and Bertrand does step in to dispossess him, and Redmond picks up the loose ball, and he plays it across Azpilicueta for Adams, and Adams gives it back into the path of Redmond, breaking down that left channel. Now we have Rudiger coming across. We end up seeing the run of Obafemi in between Tomori and in between Rudiger, and that drags out Tomori, and now Redmond's able to clip the ball over Tomori into the path of Højbjerg, who is breaking free into the box, but the ball that Redmond does play is slightly overhit, and it's a wasted opportunity. But once again, Chelsea trying to play through Southampton's organized shape, get hit on the counter, because Hudson-Odoi in this position struggled to receive the ball with pressure on his back, and now with Azpilicueta taken out of the game, once again, Redmond, Adams, Obafemi cause a threat in transition, and Chelsea were lucky once again not to concede. So when we look to the next example, this time we do see Rudiger try to mix it up, playing a long diagonal ball for Hudson-Odoi, but Cedric does win the header, and it ends up falling to Armstrong, who was closed by Emerson and Mason Mount trying to recover, and he's able to skip by them with his darting run, then cut across Jorginho before squaring the ball to Højbjerg. Højbjerg now receives the ball, and we see Willian recovering, but Willian and Conte are split, and Højbjerg ends up playing a pass into Redmond, dropping off of Azpilicueta. So now what ends up happening there is that Redmond picks up the ball ahead of Azpilicueta, and he ends up splitting Azpilicueta and Conte for Armstrong continuing his run into midfield. What we end up seeing here now is Bertrand ends up continuing his run forward, which drags out Willian. So Willian's taken out of position, so he can't track the run of Redmond, who does run off of Azpilicueta. And what Armstrong's able to do is able to clip the ball over Rudiger into the path of Redmond, who is now breaking towards goal, and Tomori does slide across, but Redmond does get his shot off, but Kepa's able to push it away. But once again, long diagonal ball from Rudiger. Chelsea are unable to get onto it. They lose the second ball. we have a break from Southampton. They're able to just quickly move the ball, run off markers, stagnant play from Chelsea, and frankly, they should be down by more here, but they get another lifeline. However, we do see some changes. We do see Pulisic come on for Hudson-Odoi, and we see Danny Ings come on for Obafemi, but shortly after that, Southampton were able to put the game to bed. What we end up seeing here is James Ward-Prowse playing the ball back to Stevens, and he's pressed by Mount, and when Mount steps towards him, Stevens is able to break forward. We end up seeing Pulisic stepping into the path of Cedric to block off that passing lane, and with Mount towards Stevens, what ends up happening there, Stevens splits Pulisic and Mount for Armstrong dropping off a bit narrow to receive the ball. When Armstrong drags out Emerson, we also see the run of Ings moving laterally to pull out Tomori, and what ends up happening there is that when Armstrong receives that ball, he instantly plays it into the path of Ings and runs off Emerson and N'Golo Kante, watching him dart forward. So Kante watches Armstrong run forward off Emerson to receive the ball back from Ings. So that sees Rudiger come across. We have Adams running off Azpilicueta and Redmond running in behind him. So what we end up seeing here from Armstrong is he clips the ball over Azpilicueta and Rudiger into the path of Redmond, and Redmond's able to bring the ball down with Kepa coming across, and he clips the ball over Kepa to put Southampton up 2-0. Besides that, Pulisic had a tame effort on goal that did lead to a corner kick, and we saw Mason Mount free kick in stoppage time being pushed over the net. When you break down the game as a whole here, is very simple. Several underwhelming performances from key players such as Azpilicueta, Willian, no service for Abraham, and when we did see Lampard move from a three-man backline to that 4-2-3-1, they still had the same issues. Southampton were able to press from the front. Their organized, shaped, and discipline ensured that they were able to mark out individual battles, and frankly, Chelsea were too narrow. Perhaps they needed the wider players to stretch the pitch rather than relying on the width from Emerson and Azpilicueta. They had no combination plays out in those wider areas, and if that wasn't working, perhaps they need to move Willian or Pulisic closer to Abraham, or gamble and throw on Michy Batshuayi, but they struggle in that respect and were constantly hit in transition by a Southampton side who looked disciplined and with the plan ready to hit Chelsea when that space was afforded them. But let me know what you guys think. What does this game tell you about Frank Lampard? Should Chelsea fans be worried? Will they still finish in the top 4? And do they need to make signings in January? And what about Southampton? Have they proved this month that they're capable of staying in the Premier League this season? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And once again, if you do like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.